Welcome to this highly focused explainer. Today, we're acting as an analytical engine to totally deconstruct the structural architecture of the Written Information Security Plan, or as we all know it, the WISP. We're going to strip away all that dry regulatory filler and look strictly at the clinical, underlying mechanisms of data protection. Because look, if you handle sensitive financial or client data, this analysis isn't just some abstract theory. It's literally the foundational architecture of your professional survival. The digital threat landscape, it's completely evolved. It's gone from isolated, opportunistic attacks into this highly industrialized, automated ecosystem of data extraction. So understanding the exact mechanics of how data is protected, and crucially, exactly how those protections fail, is absolutely paramount. So let's just dive right into the core ideas, the mechanisms, and those critical cause and effect relationships that actually govern modern data security.
Here's how we're breaking this down systemically today. We're going to cover the anatomy of cyber vulnerabilities, the core mechanisms of a WISP, the essential security framework, incident detection, breach response protocols, and finally, continuous risk adaptation.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the anatomy of cyber vulnerabilities, and exactly why you might be a high-yield target.
Okay, let's dive into this by challenging a really common, yet honestly highly dangerous assumption. You've got to ask yourself, is a security plan just a static document you print out, file away in a desk drawer, and use just to appease regulators? Or is it a continuous, living operational mechanism? Look, if you view security merely as a one-time compliance box to check off, you're already operating at a severe disadvantage. The threat landscape simply isn't static, right? And therefore, your defense architecture literally cannot be static either. The implicit assumption that compliance equals security is the exact gap that threat actors exploit. If your plan only exists to satisfy an auditor, well, you're essentially leaving the back door wide open and just hoping nobody checks the lock. And there's a very distinct cause and effect relationship that makes smaller practitioners the absolute prime targets for systemic financial fraud. Think about it. Smaller and medium-sized practices hold a staggering concentration of wealth, but in the form of raw data. We're talking social security numbers, bank routing details, highly confidential home addresses. It's a massive, high-yield data treasury. Yet, unlike those massive enterprise operations, these smaller hubs rarely possess the hardened, low-resistance cybersecurity infrastructure. They don't usually have dedicated IT security teams operating 24/7. So to a sophisticated threat actor, this is the perfect asymmetry. It's maximum reward for minimum effort. Why try to blow the vault door off a heavily guarded bank when you can just target lightly defended, decentralized networks that are holding the exact same currency? Moving right along to Section 2, the core mechanisms of the WISP, taking us way beyond a simple checklist. So the crucial point here is that a written information security plan, which remember is mandated by privacy and financial regulations, is actually an active, living framework. It legally requires you to designate a specific individual to oversee security, conduct regular vulnerability assessments, and enforce strict, non-negotiable protocols like data encryption and multi-factor authentication. This isn't just a friendly suggestion. It's a strict regulatory requirement designed specifically to force a proactive security posture. You can think of this framework as essentially the central nervous system of your digital operations. It ensures that every single piece of data moving through your practice is governed by explicit, clinical rules of engagement rather than just relying on blind trust and old habits. Now, we really need to completely dismantle the implicit assumption that a WISP is just a stack of paperwork. The perceived WISP is a static, one-time regulatory compliance document. But the actual WISP? It's a dynamic, operational risk roadmap. It absolutely must adapt continuously. When you hire a new employee, when you change your software vendor, or, when a totally new type of ransomware emerges, your WISP has to be updated immediately to reflect those shifting variables. Because if your architecture doesn't account for a new entry point, well,
That entry point is vulnerable. It's that simple. If you fail to plan and continuously update that plan, you are literally engineering your own failure.
Let's get into the hard specifics in Section 3, the essential security framework built on 6 pillars of defense. Experts agree that a robust structural foundation has to be built on 6 specific pillars of defense. First up, active antivirus software. But it must be constantly updated to catch new vulnerabilities, scanning for actual behavioral patterns rather than just looking for known threat signatures. Second, firewalls, and we mean both hardware and software, to strictly regulate your network's perimeter and block external threats from ever establishing a foothold. Third is two-factor or multi-factor authentication. This is huge because it neutralizes stolen passwords, since the attacker would also need physical access to a secondary device. Fourth, you need secure backup protocols. Fifth is hard drive encryption. This ensures that if a physical laptop is stolen, the data remains mathematically scrambled and completely unreadable to anyone who doesn't have the decryption key. And finally, number 6, virtual private networks, or VPNs, to create a secure, encrypted tunnel for any remote access, shielding your data from interception on things like public Wi-Fi. If your practice is missing even one of these 6 pillars, your entire architecture is structurally compromised. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute gold standard for data retention, the 3-2-1 backup rule. It's pretty simple, but incredibly effective. You need 3 total copies of your data, stored across 2 different types of media formats, with at least 1 copy stored entirely offline. And I really want to emphasize that offline component. It is the absolute ultimate failsafe against network-based attacks. You see, advanced ransomware is specifically designed to crawl through your network and encrypt your backups right along with your primary systems. So if a backup is connected to the network, it's vulnerable. Period. Having that offline copy severs that cause and effect chain entirely. This brings us to Section 4, incident detection and indicators, and recognizing the non-obvious. All right, let's map out the precise relationship between specific attack vectors and those really subtle indicators that actually signal an active intrusion. For instance, take spear phishing, where attackers heavily target your credentials. A massive red flag isn't always going to be some loud alarm on your screen. Actually, it's often a client calling you up to report a strange email that looks exactly like it came from your office. Or with ransomware, before the total system lockdown even occurs, you might notice unexpected automated password resets. That's often triggered by the attacker testing their elevated access behind the scenes. And with keyloggers, which are secretly capturing your keystrokes, the footprint is usually unrecognized off-hours login attempts right into your software portals. True detection requires actively observing these subtle anomalies and connecting the dots. You can't just wait around for the system alarms to sound, because by then, it's almost always too late. Now, what's really interesting here is how expert analysis completely separates the speculation of safety via ransom payments from clinical fact. Look, if a threat actor locks your system, paying the ransom absolutely does not guarantee they'll unlock it. And more importantly, it certainly doesn't mean they haven't already exfiltrated and sold your client's data on the dark web. The permanent exposure of sensitive data almost always happens way before that ransom note even appears on your screen. Extortion is just their secondary monetization strategy. This is exactly why your only true leverage, the only thing that completely breaks the attacker's power over your operations, is having that offline backup and a highly proactive defensive architecture in place.
Let's jump to Section 5, Data Breach Response Protocols and the exact sequence of containment.
Okay, we need to break down the exact chronological logic of a breach response, because the urgency here simply cannot be overstated. If you get this sequence wrong, a manageable incident quickly snowballs into a catastrophic liability. Step 1, isolate the network immediately to stop the bleeding. Just sever the connection. Step 2, retain power for IT forensics. Step 3, promptly notify the designated regulatory bodies and law enforcement so they can activate their broader fraud monitoring systems. And Step 4, execute client notification and set up credit monitoring for them. And listen,
Transparency here isn't just an ethical obligation, it's a strict regulatory mandate. Attempting to cover up or hide a breach literally guarantees immense legal and professional fallout down the line.
And this leads to a highly non-obvious, absolutely critical insight. Do not power down. I know, instinct completely screams at us to just pull the plug or hold down the power button on a compromised machine to make the madness stop. But doing so instantly destroys the system's volatile memory, the RAM. You definitely want to disconnect the Ethernet cable or turn off the Wi-Fi router to halt any further data exfiltration. Yes, cut the connection, but absolutely under no circumstances turn the machines off. Leave them running. Your IT forensics team desperately needs that preserved volatile memory to trace exactly how the attackers bypassed your pillars, what specific files they actually touched, and what malicious payloads they left behind.
Following an incident, robust mitigation is obviously key. And this brings us to the Identity Protection Pin, or IP pin. This is a dynamic 6-digit code utilized as a post-breach mitigation mechanism. Essentially, if client data is compromised, this pin acts as a really vital secondary lock. Without it, unauthorized actors simply cannot process fraudulent financial filings, even if they've already stolen all the social security numbers and routing data. In fact, experts strongly recommend that practitioners advise all their clients to proactively go out and acquire one of these pins as a primary defense layer long before a breach ever even occurs. And that brings us to our final part, Section 6, Continuous Risk Adaptation and the Life Cycle of Resilience. Let's see how this all builds into a continuous loop of adaptation, visually proving that a WISP is literally never finished. A true security architecture operates as a continuous, unbroken cycle. Phase 1 is the clinical assessment of your internal vulnerabilities. Phase 2 is the actual, physical implementation of those 6 pillars of defense we outlined earlier. Phase 3 requires constantly monitoring and rigorously testing those systems quarterly. And this doesn't just mean glancing at a dashboard. It means running simulated attacks, conducting surprise phishing tests on your staff, and actually verifying that your offline backups can be successfully restored in a real crisis. Finally, Phase 4 is revision. Whenever there's a personnel change, a new software integration, or a post-incident review, the WISP must be actively updated. Security is an ongoing life cycle. It is absolutely not a final destination.
We're going to wrap up this explainer with a pretty provocative clinical question for you to analyze regarding your own operations. If a systemic breach compromised your data architecture tomorrow, is your WISP operational enough to dictate your exact actions today? Or is it really just a dusty piece of paper sitting in a drawer? Remember, in the high-stakes realm of data security, hope is simply not a strategy. If you fail to deliberately engineer your defensive architecture, you have already engineered your own failure. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. Keep analyzing, keep optimizing, and keep learning.